Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the In the Oven show. Today's guest is a freelance entertainment journalist and something a bit different, so I thought we'd get him on to have a chat. He's based in Manchester, specialising in movies, TV and pop culture. He writes for lots and lots of newsstand and online publications like The Guardian, The Independent, Little White Lies, Total Film, The Big Issue, Kerrang, which is a blast from the past for me, Yahoo Movies, and so many more. Over the years, he's interviewed a wide variety of actors, directors, musicians, media personalities. I even recall him interviewing me years and years and years ago, so it's come full circle. So he's interviewed people like Demi Moore, Seth Rogen, Amy Poehler, to even Bryan Cranston, Danny DeVito, and Anjelica Huston. So he's also the editor of manchesterwire.co.uk, which is a popular What's On site showcasing the best things to do, which I imagine is quite difficult at the moment. So we'll get into that. Things to kind of see, eat, and do in the city of Manchester. It can be usually found either at the cinema, which is where I saw him last, or at the pub. So I'd like to welcome Simon Bland to the show. Hi, Simon. How you doing?
Hey Dan, how's it going? Thanks for inviting me on the show. This is a real cool setup you've got going on.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I've been meaning to reach out to you for ages because you've just got probably one of the coolest careers that I know of, just kind of interviewing awesome people, and you've done it for so long. So I wanted to give a different angle to the show and really just dive into some of the nuances of what you do and what you've been through and how you work. But I wanted to open with more of a relaxed vibe, and we haven't spoken for a long time, really. So I just wanted to delve in and kind of ask, what's the first memory you have of us kind of meeting? And because we go back a long time.
Yeah. This is one I was thinking about, since we've been talking about doing this, and I think it goes back to Scouts. I don't think we were in the same Scout group, but I think maybe our Scout troops when at one point sort of met up, which was years ago. That was in between primary school and high school. So that's a vague first memory. But then I think the main memory that I have when I think of you is watching you play guitar in the music room of our high school. And it was probably one of the things that convinced me to then start to learn the guitar, because every lunchtime we would literally go to the music block and you would be playing guitar and we'd have a drummer there and you just play covers of very sort of the time new metal songs. I think there's a lot of Papa Roach and things like that. So I have really strong memories of that. And obviously high school, I mean, that was a scarily long time ago now when you think about it. But I think that's probably the earliest memory I have of you. And then, of course, when we were gigging in college, which isn't the first memory of you, but I definitely remember depending on you so much for guitar amps. And I'm like, Dan, I don't know what I'm doing with this guitar. You need to tune it for me. I was like, why was I in a band? If I couldn't tune the guitar properly, what am I expecting people to take away from that show? So as you say, memories that go back, a long time now. We're old now, Dan. We're old.
So old. Body's starting to break down and shut down. Even I thought I'd get longer than this. It's just, I think it's the toll of lifting too much heavy equipment over the years. Just gig. But that's my memory as well. We kind of met in high school really properly, and then we're in the kind of group of friends and kind of just helped each other out as we kind of went along, really. So You delved into journalism quite early on, really, from almost end of high school, college, kind of getting into that. So when did you realise you wanted to go down that path of, journalism in general?
So I remember when we went to college, there was a crossroad path where I was like, okay, do I do art or do I do film? And I just chose film because I just enjoyed watching movies and TV shows and didn't really think too much about how I would make a career in that world. I was just thinking, okay, this would be really good. And then after college, we went to university. And at the same time, I sort of was at another crossroads where I was like, well, what do I want to do at university? Is it art or is it film? I did have an interest in art, but I was just notoriously not good enough at it to really do anything with it. And also art and film are two career choices where people do wonder, okay, how are you going to make a living in those two things? Anything creative and artistic, like it gets your parents or anyone a little older thinking, yeah, that's a great idea for a career. I'm sure you'll manage to make a living doing that. But yeah, then I noticed that Manchester Met was doing like a film and media course. So similar to the decision of college of choosing to do film and media at college, I was like, oh, I'll just continue that and do film and media at university. And then I was doing the course, and first years of university are just a bit of a joke, really, aren't they? It's mainly just drinking and getting through with the bare minimum so you can get to the second year. But then when we got to the second year, they were like, okay, in order to pass this course, you need to do a week's worth of professional industry work experience. And I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? Because deep down, your own sort of work ethic, and what you're going to be good at and what you're going to be bad at. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to be, I can't see myself being a director or directing a feature or a short film, even though we did do that at university. I couldn't really, the idea of producing something didn't really interest me with all the numbers and the balancing budgets and things like that. And due to sort of a lack of knowledge, I just thought, well, what's the most attainable way in? And I just thought, well, journalism, I could do that from my bedroom. I could do that from my computer. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then in order to sort of get through the second year of university, I applied for work experience at Empire magazine on a bit of a whim. And just randomly got accepted for a week's placement at Empire magazine, which is still the biggest movie magazine around. And that was really eye-opening. I still didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really know what the role of film journalism or a film journalist was. So then I had to figure out how I was going to survive this week in London when we're both from Blackpool. You're obviously around that area. You're obviously not there now. But at the time, I was like, where am I going to live in London for a week? That's going to cost me so much money. So I ended up staying in a hostel for a week, sharing a 4-bedroom room with homeless people that had scraped together just enough money to stay there for a week. It was for the first time in the big city. It was okay, this is kind of intense. And I was basically doing grunt work. I was making cups of tea, transcribing other people's interviews. And, when you're the work experience kid in a big organization like that, they don't, everyone's busy. They don't really have time to give you the really exciting jobs. So I just kind of did it and then came home and managed to get through my second year of university. And then I completed that degree. And then I was out into the world of retail, and I worked in the Arndale Centre in Manchester in a toy shop. And it was terrible. I don't know if anyone's ever worked in the Arndale or worked in retail, but they'll feel my pain. And that was really useful because it taught me what I didn't want to do. I really experienced firsthand. I was like, well, this isn't working. I don't want to do this. And then I thought back about university and thought, okay, well, what can I actually do? And again, journalism just felt like the most attainable way in. So I started blogging. I started doing more unpaid work placements. By this point, I had friends that lived down in London, so I graduated from the hostels, and I was sleeping on people's couches for 2 weeks, a month at a time. And then after that, I thought, okay, there's a limit to what I actually know about the craft and how to be useful in this role. So then I decided to sort of double down and do a top-up degree at UCLan in magazine journalism. And then it sort of spiraled from there, basically. That's a very long-winded answer to your question, but that's basically how I decided to do it. Just basically because it was the most attainable way to access that world, which I think for a lot of people, I think we have mutual friends that do now work in the film and media industry, and it's more and more becoming an attainable way in. But even as recently, from my point of view, recently from about 15 years ago, it just felt like a completely different world to crack. And I was like, well, that's not something, a guy from Blackpool does. It's just not something that will happen. So yeah, I think it's just winging it really and blagging it, and then I've sort of ended up where I've ended up today.
You decided to go back to uni, and then you'd kind of learnt your craft as much as you could in education. How did you then get to the next stage? Was it a lot of graft, doing favours, doing freebies, or like were you a bit more proactive about it and had someone giving you insight? Like, how would someone get from the education stage thinking into more of the work headspace?
At a certain point early on in my career, I was like, well, I just need to get down there to London because everything was happening in London. If you're outside of London, you don't get any of the opportunities because all the junkets, where all the stars go and do their interviews, happens down in London. All the previews of movies that you need to see before you get to interview the stars happen down in London. And you're just very, very cut up. The north-south divide it's sort of like a lot of people. It kind of angered me because it was like, it does make it this little cult club that, by this sort of geography lottery, a bunch of people can really rapidly rise up the career ladder just purely because they're in the right place. So early on, I was like, okay, I just need to go do more work placements. So, work placements are free to do. I'm sure magazines still do them. And they have to, or they did then, they had to sort of by law give work placement opportunities to new journalists. So because of that, they were like obliged to take on these people into the office. And the more of them that I did, I realized, okay, you can get more out of these by being more proactive and useful in the office. So I just started saying yes to every opportunity that I got and overstaying my welcome in people's couches and stuff. And eventually, though, it got to the point where I was applying for jobs or for work placements, and they were like, you're at a point now where you could probably apply for a job. You don't really need to be applying for this placement. So then I sort of doubled down in terms of taking what I'd learned on those placements and trying to apply them, but from a remote point of view. So based in Blackpool at the time, I would just read all the magazines that I wanted to write for and really understand them inside and out, and look at the regular some of the regular features that they need to fill every month. Every magazine has, in addition to the ever-changing news stories and features that are timely and pegged to releases of films and TV shows that are out that given month, they need to have certain pages of the magazine filled every month. So I would just try and be useful and help an editor's job by saying, how about you let me do this for this page of the magazine, or how about you let me do this? For every 10 emails I sent, 5 or 7 would be a no, but some of them would be a yes. And then I wouldn't tell anyone where I was based. I'd literally be doing it out of my bedroom in Poehler, just outside Blackpool. And I'd try and get phone interviews and get exclusives. Occasionally I would jump on the megabus or the train if I had enough money and go up to London and interview people in London, or I would go to film screenings, which would then allow me to review the film or get access to some of the stars. But for the most part, I just basically emailed editors remotely and really sort of pushed my way into the top of their email inbox through a tightrope walk of sort of being annoying, but sort of being politely persistent, shall we say. And I just sort of built it up. And then once I started getting things in print, all of a sudden you've got yourself a basis of a portfolio. And once you can say you've been published in 1 or 2 magazines, it's then easier to go to other editors and be like, well, I've been published in this magazine, so why don't you let me do something similar in your magazine? So it's sort of a snowballing effect. But yeah, it was hard at first because it is really daunting, and there's so many people that want to do it. And being up north, you did feel quite cut off. Yeah.
Do you think people overthink that initial stage and procrastinate more than they should do, and really it's more of a numbers game rather than a quality game initially? You've just got to put yourself out there in every possible way you can.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's plenty of ways for you to think, you can think of any number of reasons to not do something and to not just think, oh, well, I'm never going to get an interview with that person, or I'm never going to get in that magazine. But one of the things that surprised me is how it doesn't really matter where you are in the UK. It's all about the relationships you have with editors. And a lot of the best relationships that I've had with editors, which literally I still have now from when I started my career about 10 years ago, I've never met these people ever, like face to face. But like we talk on email as if we've known each other for years, because we have. But you nurture that relationship over time, and you wouldn't get to nurture that relationship, like you say, if you were just like, oh, okay, I'm not even going to try. And if you let it get into your head that there's so many other people wanting to do this, why should I bother? Then you just wouldn't do it. So I think a certain level of being tenacious really, really does help. And sort of like, what have you got to lose? If they say no, then you're in the same position. If they say yeah, then you've got to start to worry, because then you've got to do what you said you're going to do. But just get to that point, yeah.
So before we kick into some specifics, like what are some of the highlights that you've had over the years of being a journalist? Like what are the things that, if someone was considering to start doing it or, wanting to, what would you say are some of those things that kept you going and kept you into it and you were like, oh, that was ace?
I think to start with, like seeing something in print, like with your name on it, like even if it was, I used to do a lot of stuff for free, just because it was a great way to kind of get better in a public space, but also just build up your portfolio. And I used to do like a monthly film roundup for all the film events going on in Manchester in the Skinny, which is an Edinburgh sort of newspaper magazine, but they had a Manchester edition. I used to do the movie roundup for those guys, and it's just you get a little buzz. Definitely like going to the shops or like going to like a little a garage on the motorway and run into the newspaper section or the magazine section and like flipping around and being like, oh, I wrote that in my bedroom, in my underpants, and now it's here. It's like, that is really cool. And then from that, I kind of, that's definitely a highlight early on. But then like the more you kind of get, and I never get numb to that. It still always blows my mind completely. Like there's been a couple of times where me and my fiance have been to New York on holiday and gone into like a magazine shop and found something that I wrote, and that just blows my mind completely, just thinking that it can go this far out. But they do go that far out, and it's sort of like working in a vacuum. You don't really get a sense of who reads your articles or where they end up, or if anyone even cares about what you're writing about. But then when you see them that far, it makes you think, oh God, like people must actually be reading these. This is quite crazy. So that's definitely a highlight. And then after that, like just sort of getting access to talk to people that I never in a million years thought I'd ever get a chance to talk to, is crazy. It constantly blows my mind, and you can't really normalize it, even though it does sort of become not normal, and it doesn't become like work, but just the fact that you would ever end up on the radar of people like Seth Rogen or like Demi Moore. That was a huge one because she's obviously like a huge star. But then a lot of times it's a lot of the really cult names that are like people I grew up watching on TV. Like I've done a lot of things with the guys who do the Muppets, and like I interviewed Carol Spinney, who was the original Big Bird for a long time, and he also did Oscar the Grouch, and that's insane. Like where at the end of the interview where he sort of talked to me as Big Bird, I'm like, this is crazy. This is actually crazy. And then all of a sudden the Oscar the Grouch like showed up as well, and like that's insane as well. And so yeah, there's loads of little highlights like that, and that's why I love doing the job so much, because really deep down, it just completely plays into everything that I love. And I can't really believe sometimes that I get to do it. So hopefully it'll carry on. Hopefully. Hopefully it won't end.
So like I started off with some of the, amazing moments in your journalism, but there must be some troughs, like not just emotionally, but like work-wise, where it's probably up and down initially. Like, what have been some of the struggles that, you know, because you see an article like written by journalists and you don't know what goes on behind the scenes, how it got there, how the thing was set up. Like, what are some of those things that you really struggled with initially when you started?
Again, this comes from like working remote and not having the benefit of learning like a craft in a magazine office environment where you've got people above you and you've got people below you, and the people above you can sort of show you the ropes and the day-to-day like processes of the way this industry works. Because just like any industry, there's a way of doing it, but then there's like the unwritten rules that no one tells you about, and you have to learn the hard way. Little things like when you can and can't approach publicists, or when you can and can't approach different magazines. Certain magazines might have certain rules. Obviously they're all in competition with each other, so you have to be aware of that. So those type of rules was definitely tricky, learning the hard way remotely, when I only had I had to learn by baptism by fire, by basically making mistakes and learning from them. Mm-hmm. So early on in my career, I definitely made a couple of like mistakes, but then you sort of learn from them and try and carry on regardless. But like when you've got your entire, your passion and your career goals invested in this industry, it can really hit hard when like you hit those troughs. So like if you do make those mistakes, you really take them personally, or I did at least. And I think a big sort of learning curve is just learning to carry on regardless, because a huge part of it, and this is sort of an ongoing trough, which is sort of it becomes more and more apparent the more you do it, and especially now because there's so many journalists and writing is so accessible because of blogging and things like that. Like you get loads of rejection letters, like you get loads of rejection emails, and you don't always get explanations as to why your ideas have been rejected. It's like competitive, but it's also relentless, because as the person responsible for generating your own income, you've got to constantly be looking for like new hooks and new opportunities, and also new ways into a story that other journalists won't have thought of, because that's what's going to guarantee you the commission. And again, like you were saying before, down to it being a numbers game, you're not the only person pitching an idea about the best way to cover the new Ghostbusters film, for example. That my pitch is one of 20 pitches or 30 pitches from people all over the world, not just the UK. So you've got to either have that relationship with the editor, or you've got to really have a standout pitch. So not taking the rejection letters to heart is definitely like a learning curve that you have to kind of get through. And just try and kind of like keep moving forward, like, because the rejections are a huge kind of downer. But then for every 10 rejections you get like 5 or 6 amazing commissions. So those are the major troughs, really. Balancing out all the positives. But yeah, you've just got to keep going, keep moving forward, and try and stay positive, because sometimes you can be like, what's the point? There's so many other people doing it, but you got to stay positive and like pepped. It's hard, especially during lockdown. But yeah, it's
very English to be self-destructive as well, I find. Like, when you ask an English person how they are, you always say, oh, not too bad. Like, it's never like, I'm amazing, like, it's awesome, like, North American response is very like, wow, life's amazing, but England's like, yeah, it could be worse. Like,
yeah.
So it's easy to do that, but like when you get these moments of like triumph and you get to speak to someone that you were surprised you got to interview, like you mentioned a couple of people like Demi Moore and Seth Rogen and the Muppets kind of people, but like, is there anyone that really stands out that was just so much fun and you didn't want to like put the phone down?
So yeah, I think there's been so many interviews where people that I've talked to that I just never thought I'd get the chance to talk to, and in terms of highlights, there's been loads of things. Like a lot of the times the big names are really amazing, because you never feel like you're going to get the chance to talk to those people. But then at the same time, a lot of the cult people that I grew up watching, it's just amazing getting the chance to speak to them. So, I mean, I spoke to Jermaine from Flight of the Conchords, which went on for ages. He kind of got through the sort of question answer part of the email, and you just sort of felt like you're having a bit of a conversation with him, which was really, really interesting. I talked to, again, like I mentioned it before, but a lot of the Muppet people, like Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch, which was crazy because you grew up watching those people. But there's just so many. It does all kind of blur into one. Demi Moore was huge because I never thought I'd get the chance to talk to someone like that. Danny DeVito, who I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, he had a great way of sort of disarming the conversation up front, where he just sort of started talking to you as if you're like his best friend. So he was like, "Hey, Simon, how's it been?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." Like, you feel like you've known the person for ages, but you haven't really, you don't know them all. But that really helps kind of like ease you into the conversation and really make you feel like you're a better friend of the person than you actually are. But yeah, like, again, like the Futurama people, that's always pretty crazy because you sort of forget that you're talking to people who have voiced programs and cartoons that you grew up watching. Some of the Simpsons people, that's pretty crazy. I talked to Matt Groening, the creator of the Simpsons, obviously, and at the end of the interview, he asked me like out of the blue, like, well, what would you like to see with like in another Futurama like series? And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to ask me that. I have no idea. But it's just like, it's crazy getting to talk to these people on a one-to-one level, because there's one thing when you meet someone in the street and you're like, oh, can I have a selfie? But then when you actually get to talk to them and dig into their creative processes, it is really addictive, and you sometimes don't want to like hang up the phone.
So how do you go about finding those people to talk to? Like, what's your process for, getting in touch with them?
It's like detective work, really. It's like it's like you kind of publicists are the main way. You really go through the publicists, and they will contact the person and tell you yes or no whether they would like to do the interview or not. But for the most part, it's just like detective work. You have to try and really find a way into these people. Sometimes it can be contact them on Twitter. I've done that. Sometimes it can be Googling the name and their agents and contacting them through their agents. Charlie Brooker was a really interesting one because I did a feature a while back about the 10th anniversary of Dead Set, which is a Channel 4 zombie Big Brother style horror comedy show. And Charlie Brooker's publicist at first was like, he doesn't have time to do this. So I just thought, oh, that was a shame, and then carried on regardless. And I thought, well, I'll try and interview another person who was in the show, Andy Nyman, who's worked with Derren Brown and a load of other people. And then I interviewed him, and it went great. And then a couple of days later, I got an email from him, and it was really out of the blue. And he said, this is really strange, but I've just had dinner with Charlie Brooker, and I mentioned that I did this interview, and he was like, in his words, why the fuck hasn't he asked me? So with this in mind, here's Charlie's email him right now and get an interview with him. So that was like crazy. I was like, oh my God. So then I emailed Charlie, and we kind of arranged an interview, and I didn't mention to the publicist or to Charlie that his publicist had said he was too busy. I just sort of cracked on and did it. But yeah, like that was a case where I ended up getting the interview through a really, strange circumstance. But then, yeah, some people I'll just, you'd be surprised how many people have websites and how many of those websites have contact areas where you can get a direct contact to the person and just drop them a line. And it's just basically trying to blag it, really. And finding your way in.
How do you balance when you actually get to talking to people? How do you balance it being a question and answer thing that can be a bit hit and miss and a bit, forced, or, becoming like a conversation piece, but still getting out of it what you want?
I do so much planning for each interview, but there is a certain part of it where you've got to, like, let it be a bit flexible and let it have a life of its own. So you have to stay on track, and sometimes that means you have to ask the cliche questions of, that go along with an article, the questions that they've been asked a million times before. But at the same time, it's all about trying to find things that they haven't been asked before and new takes on familiar topics. And that can be really hard because, like, a lot of the people I talk to have been asked a million times about the same film or TV show or album or whatever. So you have to really do your research and find a new way in. And trying to keep it light, trying not to stick too closely to your interview questions, and sort of reading the room. I think sometimes you can tell in people's voices when they're done talking about this now and it's time to wrap up. And sometimes you can tell when people are welcoming more conversation, they're just really happy to be talking about a certain topic. So a big part of it is reading the room, I think, and reading the temperature of the conversation, which only comes throughout, by doing loads of interviews, really. You've got to really put in the time and read the sort of writing on the wall.
So you're talking to a lot of, relatively high-profile celebrities. Who's surprised you with being the most, like, down-to-earth and approachable? Maybe give a few instances of people you've spoken to and what you've kind of talked about that you were surprised.
Well, Bryan Cranston was really intense. Like, he was really, really... He just had coronavirus when I talked to him. And he was dead, like, into the minutiae of, like, acting, like, the real... Which he should be, because he's one of the greatest actors in the world. So, I shouldn't have been surprised that he was so deep in terms of analysing the way that Hal, the stupid dad in Malcolm in the Middle, reacts to getting covered in bees. Like, he really thought about that. And I was just like, hey, that was funny, wasn't it? You got covered in bees. And he was like, yeah, but, he really got deep into it.
Really?
Yeah. And then, you do get some people like that who really go deep in terms of, like, the craft, and they take it very seriously. But, yeah, I mean, there's loads of people have surprised me. Like, when people get emotional, that's really difficult to deal with, because it's always unexpected, and actors a lot of the time have their emotions on the sleeve because that is their skill set. So it's no surprise that they can access them so easily and so seamlessly and so quickly. And yeah, there's been plenty of times where I've talked to people and they've choked up and they've been unexpectedly emotional. Yeah, it's crazy when people do surprise you. Like, people like Seth Rogen, like, as soon as you kind of get on the phone and you hear his laugh, he's got that sort of very Seth Rogen laugh. Yeah, exactly. You're immediately grounded because you think, oh yeah, it's like, that's exactly what I expected. Simon Pegg, he was very, very approachable. A lot of these people are very approachable. It really helps talking to these people when you get past that sort of starstruckness and you kind of see them for people. The other week I interviewed Charlie Sheen, and he was very sort of approachable guy, very down to earth, very, very, like, lighthearted, not like the drug-addled guy that you see on YouTube clips or GIFs and things like that. Yeah, so it's every person is different, really.
That's interesting. I know you've had some time speaking with people that are fascinated with English culture. So, like, how's that been with people knowing way too much about you, but, like, and where you're from?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, because we're both from, I say Blackpool only because that's the main place that people know. We're both not from Blackpool, but I imagine people wouldn't really know Garstang or Poland. I know, I was interviewing Mike Myers, and he was obviously, like, he has so many ties to the UK because Austin Powers is British, Fat Bastard is Scottish. He's done so many British characters in his career. I think his dad was Liverpudlian. He's got a real strong connection to the north of the UK. And like, as soon as I got on the phone with him, he just was like, oh, where are you from? And I was like, I'll tell you where I'm from, but you won't know where I'm from. You will have no idea. But I mentioned Blackpool, and he was like, oh yeah, Blackpool Tower, yeah, the prom, yeah, the sandcastle, Stanley Park, all these places. I was like, there's no way you have been to Stanley Park. And he's like, yeah, I used to go there all the time, summer holidays. Our family would come over. We got Preston. I was like, you'd got Preston. Mike Myers would be in Preston.
For a treat, yeah.
Yeah, for like a day out. I was like, that's a far stretch from Hollywood. I mean, you're Shrek. What are you doing in Preston? So that was really weird. And then Dan Aykroyd as well. About a year ago, I did an article on the 40th anniversary of the Blues Brothers, which is one of my favorite movies. I grew up watching it. And Dan Aykroyd has this encyclopedic knowledge of not only England, because his family go back all the way to Yorkshire, I think, or around that area, but like the most haunted areas of the UK, because he's really into, he's a Ghostbuster. Why wouldn't he be into the most haunted areas of anywhere?
It's his job, yeah.
It's his job. It's his trade. So he was immediately reeled off like the top 3 most haunted places within my vicinity. Like when I told him where I was, he's like, "Oh yeah, go down the road there, and you've got the Aykroyd family church is just a few yards down the road." And I was like, "Okay, if you say so. You know more about this than I do. I can see it from my window right now, but you clearly know everything." So yeah, it's like it makes you realize how small of a world it is. You don't realize that. I thought I was from an obscure place in the UK, but apparently not.
It depends who you talk to, because I live in Canada now, and I have to say Manchester a lot, or Manchester United, or Liverpool, and they're like people's. If I say Blackpool, no one's heard of it. I wouldn't visit it if you were over there. It's not like a hot destination to go to. So. No, I completely get that. So when you hear like big celebrities knowing almost pinpoint where you're from, it's like, I bet it creates that connection a lot quicker to get you through that almost, nervous kind of, are they going to enjoy this kind of conversation thing?
Yeah.
Just get you through that and you're in, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's totally true, because no matter who you're interviewing, you really don't know what you're getting yourself into until you are in front of them, or until you're on the phone with them. And like, because even if they are like the most friendly, the people with the most friendliest reputation in the world, you could just catch them on a bad day. Like, I won't name any names, because everyone that I've interviewed has been really really great, but you just don't know until you get on the phone. And when you do strike that balance up front, like it's great, because it takes you completely off guard. Because I go into every interview thinking, okay, I've got to get in and out. I don't want to take up too much of this person's time, because really every time I think about doing interviews, I'm like, and why have you given me the time of day? Like, there's no reason why I should be on the phone to you right now. There's no reason why, I should be talking to, I don't even know, Charlie Sheen. I just shouldn't be on the phone to Charlie Sheen. That should never happen. I shouldn't be on the phone to these people. So I'm like, okay, I need to get in and out. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think sometimes I do sort of fall on the whole, try to kill them with kindness type of thing. I really, without being too gushy or bootlicky, I do try and be grounded and be like, look, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me, because I know you're really busy. You're way busier than me. So I appreciate it. And I think by breaking down that barrier up front and just sort of telling them how much you appreciate them taking the time out of the day to talk to you, they do kind of give you the time of day. And it is disarming when people have that connection to something that you thought was so personal to you. It really helps the conversation go. But then it is difficult then steering it back on track. Like, okay, this is great talking about the Pleasure Beach, but we really need to talk about Tremors 3, which is like some niche, some really niche 80s, 90s horror movie that went direct to DVD, which is how I make my living.
So you're interviewing people and you've got everything down. Like, what's the process for writing good copy and getting the interview across in a way that's, short, sweet, but entertaining? You're dealing with very precious things sometimes, like emotional testimonies or whatever, or people, you're talking about real precious pop culture type stuff. So how do you make sure that's dealt with?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I do too. So I do kind of like two sides of copywriting and journalism. So I do a lot of creative copywriting for businesses, and that could be people come to me with a brief they want me to talk about their new shop opening, especially if it's for Manchester Wire. It could be a new bakery opening in town. I need to get the key information across up front. So then there's this inverse pyramid where you lead with the most important story, and then you basically drip feed down the lesser important bits of the story. So that's a whole technique of learning how to write for that market. And with journalism, a lot of it is really showcasing the quotes that you've gathered from these really interesting people, and getting them across up front in a really grabby way that's really going to grab a reader, especially right up at the top of the article, because most people don't read the whole thing, so you really need to grab them in that first paragraph. And throughout both of those two sides of the equation, the ability to write in a really short, condensed and succinct manner is so key. Like, I get stressed out when I see sentences that go on longer than like 2 lines, because I just know it's getting a bit too much. Like, I want to try and like really pare it back, really say as much as I can in as few words as possible. But on top of that, you've got to also inject a lot of your own personality in there, which is a different side of the equation, which is really difficult, because when you're doing businessy writing, you don't really have that much opportunity to inject a lot of your personality. A lot of it is fact, dates, times, what you've got to get across, what the client wants you to get across. And that makes good copywriting from that aspect and that niche and that sector. But for journalism, you've got to do that. You've got to get across all the really grabby bits, but you also want to put across more of yourself. And that's something that I've been really trying to do more of. As I progressed, there was a period of my career where I was getting a lot of commissions and I was writing for a lot of magazines, but I found myself following a formula a bit too closely. And I thought, I'm not really pushing myself here. What I really want to develop is my own voice and really put my own character in there. So that is something that I've been really trying to develop this past year. And it's hard, because in my eyes, the people I interview are way more interesting than me. So you want to hear from those people. You don't want to hear from me. But for the sustainability of what I do need to develop my own voice. And I need to kind of put that across. So I'm forever trying to get better. And also, I think responding to criticism, I get criticism from editors, constructive criticism, at least that's what I tell myself, every now and then. And I try and, instead of just being like, fuck you, I'm going to ignore that, which you should never do, I try and take it on board and think, okay, well, where are they coming from? Because 9 times out of 10, even more than that, it will improve my writing. They're telling me this for a reason. They're not just being harsh. So the ability to kind of take that on board and really adapt it and improve your work is a constant learning process. And understanding what the audiences are for each outlet that you're writing for. Little White Lies, their audience will be interested in a different aspect of cinema than Total Film will be interested in. So it's just understanding those niches and then bringing them to the front or to the fore of each article that you're writing.
So you're talking to people that have, nostalgic roles, who have been, engulfed in a character per se, or are kind of tagged with it, tarnished almost sometimes. So how do you feel people are in that situation? What was your experience working with people that have to kind of keep a character going, or maybe it's hard to get away from?
I think it's really interesting, because you're absolutely right. Like, everyone that I talk to, or the majority of people that I talk to, have had an early success with a really iconic film or TV show or TV series, and it's really come to define who they are and who audiences see them as, and that can be a real double-edged sword. I think a lot of times there's a trajectory that you kind of can identify that a lot of them follow. So they start off, enjoying the success, and then maybe in the middle part of their career, they're thinking, oh my God, I'm really associated with this character and I really wish I wasn't. And then eventually they come back round to it and they really start to see and to appreciate just the strong bond that and the roles and the sort of influence and impact that those roles have had on audiences. Because I think we take for granted just how profound and important pop culture is on everyone. People define their lives by it. People really hang a lot of their identity on it as well. And, for example, a couple of weeks ago, or I think it was a couple of months ago, I interviewed Alan Ruck, who is an actor who's in Succession at the moment, which is a great series. Everyone should watch Succession. But he's best known for playing Cameron Fry, Ferris Bueller's kind of nervous friend who is brought along on Ferris's kind of day off and Ferris Bueller's day off, and he is obviously for a long time was defined as that character because that film had such a strong bond with audiences. People really connected to it. It's one of the biggest films of the 80s. It's one of the best young adult films ever made. Now he's got the second career interest with Succession, but it's the 35th anniversary of Ferris Bueller's Day Off this year, and I was like not gonna not ask him about that. Our interview wasn't about that, but I was definitely gonna ask him about that. So the real test was the challenge was to try and find an interesting way in. So my way in was to try and talk to him about the way that his relationship with the movie has changed over this period. And what you find is that there was a period of time where he hated the movie. He really hated the fact that everywhere he went, he was Cameron Fry, and every time people bumped into him on the street, they were asking him if it was his day off, and he really came to hate it. But now he sort of has this appreciation for how this movie helped people, and I feel like you do get that. You do get that appreciation with people. I mean, like Bill and Ted as well as another example, that on the surface is a very goofy, light-hearted time travel movie about two airhead dudes who travel around time in a phone booth. But at the same time, they've put out this message into the world of, be excellent to each other, which is a really kind of profound message, especially in today's climate where everyone is so divided and everything is so constantly terrible. Like the fact that you can just be like, look, just be cool, don't be a dick, is a really nice thing. And I think that the creators do get a sense of that, and it's really nice talking to these people who, and a lot of the people I talk to agreed to talk to me because they have come around to that point of view of understanding and appreciating the effect that their work has had on audiences, and it's nice. It's nice hearing that because we really do take it for granted, and yeah, it's just really interesting because pop culture is such a big part of our lives, and especially during the past 12 months, a lot of the people that I've interviewed have really been in awe of how audiences have really fallen back on these nostalgic, familiar films as a form of therapy to get them through really difficult times. Like people have, for the majority of people, we've been locked down and it's been inconvenient. Some people have had real difficulty in the past 12 months, and they've relied on shows like The US Office or like Community or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or all these programs as a form of escape from the terribleness of the news. And that's really crazy that what seemingly is throwaway could have such a restorative, lifeline effect for people. And the people involved with it really do understand that. So that's really nice.
When I think iconic characters that are synonymous with the roles they played, I always think back to, Marty McFly and Doc Brown in Back to the Future. And they really, whenever I see them doing something related to the Back to the Future, they're always engulfed in it, up for it. And I just feel that, Michael J. Fox, given all the struggles he's been through, to still do that and still care as much as he does and realise how into that film people are and how nostalgic they are. Like, it's kudos to them every time I see them doing something about it.
Back to the Future is this huge multi-generational movie, and they, in a sense, have what we were just talking about to the nth degree. They're never going to escape Back to the Future. Back to the Future is here to stay. They better get on the bandwagon of it and enjoy it and embrace it, or they're going to have a really hard time. And I think you're absolutely right. I think Michael J. Fox is always going to be Marty McFly. Like he's never going to escape that role. But for all the hard things he's had to deal with in his life and continues to have to deal with in his life, in a way, like what a gift it is to have this role for him to be associated with most. He's he's retired now, and we may not get to see him that much more on TV or movies, but how amazing is it that everyone's mental image that they're going to have as Marty McFly, as Michael J. Fox and Marty McFly for years and decades, and it's going to long outlive all of us, is this really youthful, time-traveling, cool guy who has a hoverboard. Like, that's amazing. I would have killed for a hoverboard in high school, and now if you can hook me with a hoverboard, Dan, that would be great, because I really would like one. But like, that's amazing. Like, no matter what he does, and he's done so many great roles, but it's just really great that he's going to live forever as the coolest guy in time traveling history, and the fact that they embrace that is really, really nice for fans, because I think it's always great when you, especially speaking as a fan, because I think first and foremost of all the things I write about, I do come from the point of view of a fan, and there's a nice feeling knowing that the people behind the camera are just as into it as you are. That's really like a nice feeling. You're like part of this little club, and I spoke to Christopher Lloyd like early on in my career, which blew my mind, because is the Doc. And not only is he the Doc, but he's been in Taxi, he's been in The Addams Family, he's been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is one of the greatest films ever made. And you did get the sense that, he didn't fully understand why this one movie, Back to the Future, has grabbed hold of society so much, but, he loved the fact that it had. People have watched that movie and decided to go, and watched Doc Brown and decided to go into science careers, and have genuinely made some science technological advances that have benefited humanity. And a lot of them pin that down to the fact of watching Doc Brown in his DeLorean and wearing his two ties in the year 2015 in Back to the Future Part 2. They pin it down to that. That is crazy. The power of pop culture is insane. So yeah, it's nice. It's nice hearing that from people. Outside of journalism, let's dig into something that people might not know about you, what you do, and what keeps you occupied outside of work. Like, I was thinking about questions that you might ask me, like, what do people know about me what do people not know about me? And I was like, God, I couldn't think of anything. I was like, how uninteresting am I that there's no one thing that I can think of that people might not know about me? I mean, I like a variety of things. I'm trying to write more. Like, it all does come down to writing. I try and write a lot whenever I can. Trying to do more fiction stuff, but it's really, really hard. But it's a challenge. But it's really good. I'm enjoying that. I got half a thumb. You might know that. Not everyone might not know that. So I only have 9 fingers. I was thinking one of the things that people might not know about me is when I was a kid. It's just really interesting. It's not really interesting, but it's interesting in the way that it played out in terms of what I do now. So when I was like 16, maybe even earlier, I think I was maybe like 13, 14, maybe even 12, Jim Carrey was like my favorite actor in the world. And for some reason, I don't even know how I did it now, but I managed to get some kind of like postal address. This was before emails or the internet or anything, to try and find his address, or address of like his team. And I sent off this letter being like, oh my God, you're my favorite actor. I love this is amazing. And then about a year later, I'd completely forgotten that I'd sent the letter. I got a signed headshot from Jim Carrey, like back with this like black and white headshot with like to Simon. Like, I think he said something like "spank you very much" because he'd just done Ace Ventura at the time. And like 12-year-old me was like pissing my pants. I was like, this is insane. This is so good. But I just think it's really crazy thinking that now I do that on a professional, or try and do that on a professional level. So I've forever been pestering celebrities. And so you're now a professional stalker, basically. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've been, I've somehow managed to monetize the whole stalking business. Inappropriate, approaching. Yeah. No, that's cool. That's really cool. And I love Jim Carrey. Like, he's so funny, and his recent mentality and his mindset stuff that's come out recently is just really cool. Like, the stuff he says where he's like, he said he like created a different persona to be Jim Carrey and stuff, and then he was like,
he said he had to get it all to then lose it all and then know what was important and stuff. So I just found some of his recent stuff to be that honest about stuff is quite cool for him. So I have a soft spot for him.
He's an interesting guy because he's like a real good example of what happens when you get everything you could ever want in the world and you're still not happy, which I really get the sense with Jim Carrey is that this is going off topic for a bit, the Jim Carrey niche, but I do get the sense that he is a deeply unhappy person. I feel like he's constantly striving for this something else that for anyone else in the world, he's got it made, but for him, there's something not quite right, and I think he's trying to work that out in a lot of the art that he does. His book that he released recently really covered that, and a lot of the work that he's doing outside of Sonic the Hedgehog right now is really trying to access some of that. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. He is an interesting guy. And I'm still a huge fan. I've still got that headshot somewhere. I'm going to get it framed, actually. I tried to find it for this call because it would be a great thing right now, wouldn't it? If I was like, and here it is. But I couldn't find it, so sorry.
It's okay. We'll forgive you. So what's next for you, mate? What's next on the agenda? Is it just more journalism? Have you got any side projects that you're working on? Or?
Yeah, so it's more of the same, really. I've constantly at any one time got about 2 or 3 different commissions that I'm chipping away at and working on. So, as I said, I'm doing something with Charlie Sheen now, and I'm trying to set something up with about the 35th anniversary of Aliens, the Jim Cameron film Aliens. I'm working on a bunch of different things on anniversaries of TV shows, of 30 Rock and things like that, which is one of my favorite TV shows. And I'm just trying to keep going at it. I think one of the big challenges now, especially with the pandemic, and that's really affected publications because if you can't get into newsagents and print journalism was already a bit kind of shaky, how are you going to, how's that going to survive? So really the key thing for me now is to just keep plugging away and keep trying to be as innovative and resourceful as I can, and really try and be as tenacious as I can to really get those commissions in the bag and to access the interviews, the people that I say that I want to try and interview, to try and get those interviews in the bag. So it's it's more of the same, and I want to try and really push what I'm doing a bit forward and change it up, and really, as I said before, try and inject a bit more of my own personality into stuff. And I would like to try and do some kind of fictional writing. Whether that will happen or not, we'll see, but hopefully, fingers crossed.
It's been great to have you on the show, Simon. Appreciate you taking the time and giving this kind of unique perspective of people you've spoken to and the way you do things. It's cool for me to find out more about you because we haven't spoken properly for a number of years, kind of kept in touch, but it's nice to actually delve into what you're doing day to day and actually what you're going through. So how can people best get hold of you? Is it LinkedIn, email? What?
Kind of all of the above, really. If you want to drop me an email, it's simon.bland, that's BLAND, at hotmail.com. And I'm on Twitter at SciTweets2. I'm on Instagram at SMN_BND. I forgot my own Instagram handle there. I am on LinkedIn, but I couldn't tell you the URL for that. But if you search my name, you'll probably find me. So yeah, if anyone wants to find out any more, or if anyone wants to try and write for Manchester Wire, if you're listening to this and you're based in Manchester, we're always looking for new writers. Or if you just want to get in touch to find out more about some of the articles I do, just drop me a line.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys, and hope you found this interesting as much as I did. If you can hit the like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you in the next one.